So I think I'm at the limit of what the throttle notch can achieve. So what I'm going to do is switch to the ESC telemetry based notch, and although this is more accurate, the great thing about this is it tracks each motor individually, and that means that the noise can be much more precisely chopped out of the profile. So I'm going to set that up, switch that over, and then rerun Autotune and see where the PIDs end up with Autotune, but also see how it flies afterwards. Okay, so I had set up the ESCs, and I had to figure out the pole count of the motors, and I think they're 24 pole, and I set it up for BD shot, but then as soon as I got it off the ground it started to oscillate, so hopefully I can just show you that briefly. Maybe if I can do the transmitter at the same time. There we go.
Motors armed. Landing complete. Motors disarmed.
And you can see that's quite a bad oscillation, and that's a great indication that the notch is not working correctly. So the tune was pretty smooth before, notch was cutting out the noise, so my guess is I've screwed up something with the setup so that the notch is not tracking the motor noise. So I'm going to pull the SD card and just quickly look at the log just to see if I can spot what's going on. The most likely thing is that I've got the number of poles wrong, for instance. That's the most likely thing, so I shall have a look. Well, I investigated and I can't figure out what's going on. The notch frequency looks correct. I can definitely see the oscillation there in the motors going up and down, but it's oscillating around the right frequency, and so it must be some kind of control issue related to the more rapid updating of the notches and perhaps the lower kV motors. So my inclination is to push the filter settings higher to see if that perhaps resolves itself. Maybe I need to have a look at what frequency it's oscillating at. I have a suspicion it'll be at one of either the D filter frequency or the gyro filter frequency. But yeah, a bit of a head scratcher. So I put back the throttle based notch settings and it flies fine, there's no oscillation, and I'm able to push up the throttle and the motors come down good. So I'll compare. I had BD shot enabled, so I'll compare the BD shot output with the harmonic notch frequency to see if we get good correlation, and I suspect I will, which makes me think it's some kind of control issue. So bit of a head scratcher, a bit of a talk to Leonard time, I think. So yeah, it seems to be flying well based on the throttle based notch. I'm quite keen to get to the bottom of this as well, because I have heard reports of people struggling with BD shot with lower kV motors. I've never really had the platform to test on, and so there definitely is a genuine issue here. I'm hoping it can just be tuned out, and once I know kind of what direction to tune in, it seems unlikely that lowering the filter settings is the right thing to do. I mean, I'm trying to do this to raise the filter settings. The other possibility, I suppose, is that the noise has got much lower and the PIDs are therefore over-tuned. That is a possibility. So that's what you see in Autotune when this is quite common in Autotune. If you drop the filter settings, like with Autotune, it's generally safe to raise the filter settings as long as the motors don't heat up, but dropping the filter settings when you've got kind of tightly tuned PIDs tends to set up these low frequency oscillations. So I wonder whether that's the issue. So it's sort of the inverse of what you see in a tune copter when you drop the filter settings, because of the noise profile. So I'm cutting out more noise here. I suspect I'm cutting out a lot more noise here, and suddenly the PIDs are kind of overcooked for the filter settings. So before I put this one to bed and fly something else, I might just raise the filter settings, you know, substantially, maybe go to 60-30, see whether that cures things. And if that seems to make things better, then I'll retune auto-tune with those settings. So I'll give it a go. Okay, so I had a little bit of a chat to Leonard, and I think what was going on with the oscillation I was seeing was the fact that I'd put a notch per motor when I switched to the ESC notches, and with the use of the triple notch, that radically increased the number of notches I was using, but I didn't decrease the bandwidth of the notches, and so the phase delay of the notches increased, and I think that was probably what was enough to trigger oscillation. So what I've done now is I'm going to still go with triple notches, still go with ESC per notch, but I've reduced the bandwidth, the notch, to a quarter of the frequency, so I'm rather than a half. So that should significantly reduce the phase delay, and hopefully I get a tighter tune. So ready to go, and I'll get it up in the air and start auto tune. Yeah, so although it's a little bit windy, that was pretty successful. So you probably can't see the parameters here, but roll has gone up by 40% and pitch has almost doubled. Although angle P is gone down slightly, so that's really interesting. So clearly the phase delay of all those notches at low frequencies is a very significant factor. So if I had time and it wasn't quite so cold, I'd go back and trial these again and see whether I can get an equivalent tune between throttle notch and ESC notch just by changing mode and reducing the bandwidth, but I'm not going to try that. I am, however, going to tune yaw up again, since these values seem to be good, and then probably I'll try and add a little bit of yaw D like I've done on some of my other copters, just to get a better tune.